ጤናስጥልን ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምሰንብታችኋል። ይህ የብርሃን ቲቪ ነው። የብርሃን ቲቪ በቶሮንቶ ካናዳ የሚያስተላልፈው ፕሮግራም አሁን ጀመረ።
ጤናስጥልን ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምሰንብታችኋል። እንኳን ለ125ኛው የአድዋ በዓል በሰላም አደረሳችሁ። እንግዲህ በዚህ በፌብሩዋሪ ወር በዚህ በካናዳ በአሜሪካ የጥቁሮች ቀን ተብሎ ይከበራል። ብላክ ሂስትሪ ማንዝ ነው ፌብሩዋሪ ወር። ይህን አስመልክቶ የተለያዩ ዝግጅቶች በየቦታው በየአካባቢው ሁሉም እንዳቅሙ እያከበረ ነው። ታዲያ በትላንትናው ዕለት ነው አርብ ፌብሩዋሪ 12 2021 በኩራዝ ድርጅት አስተባባሪነት የተዘጋጀ የዙም ኮንፈረንስ ወይንም ደግሞ የዙም ሚቲንግ ነበረ። እንግዲህ እዛ ላይ ብዙ እንግዶች ተገኝተዋል። በተለይ የፕሮግራሙ አዘጋጅ ዶክተር ፍስሐ ያዕቆብ፣ ዶክተር ሙሉ የተለያዩ እንግዶች በእንግድነት ተጋብዘዋል። አቶ ባንቲሁን ትዛዙ ፕሮፌሰር ኢንጂነር ናቸው። በዚህ በቶሮንቶ ካናዳ ነው የሚኖሩት። አቶ ቴድሮስ ዘውድ ደግሞ የፒኤችዲ ተማሪ የዮርክ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ሌክቸረር ናቸው። ሚስተር ኤቨርተን ጎርደን ነበሩ። የ30 ዓመት ኤክስፒሪየንስ ኤዱኬሽን ኤክስፒሪየንስ ሶሻል ሰርቪስ ሰራተኛ ናቸው። ዶክተር ፍስሐ ያዕቆብም እንዲሁ የፕሮግራሙ አዘጋጅ ሲሆኑ በኩራዝ ድርጅት ውስጥ ለ15 ዓመት የሰሩ ሲሆን በዚህ በቶሮንቶ አስተማሪ ናቸው የዩኒቨርሲቲ። በተለይ ደግሞ በክብር እንግድነትም የተጋበዙት የታሪክ ተመራማሪ ጄፈርሰን ይባላሉ። እሳቸውም ነበሩ። ሌሎችም ደግሞ በመቀጠልም አቶ ጴጥሮስ ደጀኔ ወልደ ዮሐንስ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ኦፍ ቶሮንቶ ግራጁዌት ያደረጉ ሲሆን በአሁኑ ሰዓት በኢትዮፒክ ሆስፒታል ኤምአርአይ ቴክኖሎጂ ሰራተኛ ናቸው። እንዲሁም የተለያዩ ተሳታፊዎች ቢኖሩም በክብር እንግድነትም የኢትዮጵያ አምባሳደር በኦቶዋ ክብርት አምባሳደር ናሲሴ ጫሊም ተገኝተዋል። እንዲሁም የተከበሩ አምባሳደር አቶ ለገሰም በቦታው ላይ ተገኝተው ሲሳተፉ ነበር። ይህን አስመልክቶ ከዚህ ቀጥሎ አጠር ያለ ቪዲዮ ይዤላችሁ ቀርባለሁ። ከዛ በፊት ግን በዚሁ በ125ኛው የአድዋ በዓልን አስመልክቶ የተለያዩ ዝግጅቶች በመዘጋጀት ላይ ይገኛሉ። በኢትዮጵያ ኤምባሲ ኦቶዋ አዘጋጅነት ቅዳሜ ፌብሩዋሪ 20 2021 ፕሮግራም አለ። ሁላችሁም በዙም ገብታችሁ እንድትከታተሉ ኤምባሲው ጋብዟችኋል ማለት ነው። እንዲሁም ኤግነስ አድቮካሲ ድርጅት ነው በዚህ በካናዳ የተቋቋመ ነው። እሱ ደግሞ ኤግነስ በፌብሩዋሪ 28 2021 ፕሮግራም በአድዋ ጉዳይ ላይ እንግዲህ ስለ አድዋ ሲነሳ ብዙ ነገር መነጋገር እንችላለን። ፕሮግራሞችን እየገባችሁ በዙም እንድትከታተሉ እናሳስባለን። ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ኮቪድ ከመጣ በኋላ ነው ይሄ ነገር በሰፊው እየተደረገ ያለው። እንደ ወደ መጀመሪያ ፕሮግራሜ ልመልሳችሁና የአድዋ በዓል በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ በመከበር ላይ ቢገኝም በትላንትናው ዕለት የተደረገው የአድዋ በዓል አከባበርና ዓለም አቀፍ ሚዲያዎች በኢትዮጵያ ላይ ያላቸውን አመለካከትን አስመልክቶ የተወያዩትን ከዚህ ቀጥሎ አቀርብላችኋለሁ። በነገው ዕለት ተመልካቾቻችን ቫለንታይን ዴይ ነው። ለፍቅረኞች ለቤተሰቦች እንኳን ለቫለንታይን ዴይ አደረሳችሁ ስል የፊታችን ሰኞ ደግሞ የፋሚሊ ዴይ ነው። በዚህ በካናዳ በተለይ በኦንታሪዮ በሰፊው ነው የሚከበረው። ኮቪድ ባይኖር ኖሮ ሎንግ ዊኬንድ ነው። አሁንም ስቲል ሎንግ ዊኬንድ ላይ ነን ያለነው። እንኳን ለፋሚሊ ቀን በሰላም አደረሳችሁ። ብርሃኑ ነኝ ከብርሃን ቴሌቪዥን። ከዚህ ቀጥሎ ፕሮግራሙን እንድትከታተሉ ጋብዛለሁ።
Next speaker is Dr. Fusha Yacob Belai. Dr. Fusha is a director of Kuraz and brings over 15 years of extensive experience in higher education, social policy, and project management. He has a PhD in curriculum studies and teacher development with collaborative program in comparative international and development education from Ontario Institute of Study in Education, University of Toronto. He is passionate, enthusiastic, and dedicated educator with remarkable knowledge of cross-cultural education system and sustainable development. He is a firm believer in lifelong learning, equity, and access to quality of education for all. Please, let's welcome Dr. Fusha Belai. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mulu, for your gracious introduction. Teddy has touched upon. Today, I'm going to quickly look at the media discourse and the Black representation in particular, how African and the continent is being represented in the West. So it will just help us to understand the genesis of why this negatively depicting, Africa, in particular the Black bodies, are in the Western discourse. So quickly, I'm gonna look at the framework. So for the longest time, for centuries, African people and Africans, since the encounter, we have been depicted in a negative light, which means media like this they always focus in the negative aspect. Right? So because this kind of depiction is pretty much predicated in the colonial discourse, whereby it's choreographed and value laden by the European aspect, where they see the white as a master race, whereas the Black and the non-white as a subhuman. In that case, this kind of depiction provide them the comfort to exploit, to subjugate, to kind of dehumanize and enslave people. And that's why it was in the media discourse. These picture like this are very, very famous. For example, when you look at this, it's like, as I said, they like to focus only on the negative aspect of, when they depict about Africa in general. For example, The Economist is one of the leading information and resource for all elite people. But you can look at this, the headline. From the get-go, you can look at this. It's like a hopeless continent. It is very sensational. It's so dramatizing. At the same time, if you look at this individual, Africa has been seen as one slab of land, homogeneous people with just like similar need or whatnot. And at the same time, Africa is being treated as one country. It really, when people who study media discourse, who understand image, how image works, this sends a lot of message, that unbroken frame of thought from the colonial aspect that Africa is being ravaged by conflict. So when you look at this again, it decontextualizes the reality. It does not have the decency to give you, to clearly understand what is the historical background, what is happening, where is the same thing. This is coming over and over and over again it's just like we are programmed. As soon as we hear the word Africa, we look at that desperate, that hopelessness, that negativity in that case. So the media has been championing in creating this depiction, this image for centuries, and it's continued to misrepresent, continue to distort the reality on the ground. Similarly, as my friends are trying to highlight with the Ethiopian context, the ongoing, law enforcement following the TPLF's attack on the national defense, the government is trying to restore the peace and security. In that process, yes, there are conflicts, yes, there are problems. However, the way it's being depicted again is resorting back to that sensationalization, as my friend earlier mentioned. That way of narration is the one that's grabbing attention. Continuously, as my friend Jeff here is going to be highlighting later on, that continuously failing Ethiopia, failing Africa, the media in the West. So it's just like sometimes they, when you look at this, they try to simplify a complex problem. Nobody just is bothering to kind of do some balanced reporting or whatnot. So, but it's easy to put this kind of picture. It's easy to depict and say, hey, this is Africa, we know. So, however, in the process, they are doing more damage, more misleading information, distorting the reality and hampering the rehabilitation, post-crisis process, in fact, leading further damage. So I really suggest that people who are in the media move away from this crisis-driven sort of journalism. So my other suggestion for this is, so what needs to be done? What do we have to do? As a person, I always ask my students, as a teacher, as well as I always ask my kids to look at to see the media representation critically. So we need to challenge this misrepresentation, this narration. At the same time, we need to also increase accountability, because when they come up with this nonsense, these general terms or whatnot, asking them, putting them and challenging them with fact-based and accurate information. The other thing I really want is to let African tell stories. So that can have significant implication in the future in addressing a challenge related to that. So before I depart, I just want to make you see this picture. When you look at this, Africa is beautiful. I'm not saying there is no problem. I'm not saying there is no challenge, but it's not unique to Africa. It's not unique to our continent. However, in that case, when you look at this, without Africa, the world cannot function properly. So I think we need to really pay attention and appreciate those who really seek the news behind the news, who critically evaluate what they see, don't take things. So I suggest, I just ask everybody who's here to be more mindful of what's happening in motherland and become more ally to the people who are actually impacting, again, being re-victimized. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to leave it here.
Thank you, Dr. Fissa, for your excellent presentation. Our next speaker is, one second, Ato Petros Dejane Walde Johannes. Petros is a graduate from UFT in medical radiation science, currently working at Ethiopico General Hospital as MRI technologist. He is a writer and director of the feature film Two Worlds, Blood Bond, ወይም ሁለት መታወቂያ, currently working on bilingual 26 episode serial film focusing on corruption. Welcome to Petros.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Mulu. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
We hear you, Petros.
All right, thank you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Fissa, for this opportunity. It's a great honor to get a platform in order to make this brief remark, or should I say, to pose a few questions for reflection on such a crucial topic and at such critical time in Ethiopia's history. A history that spans from the Aksumite Empire more than 2,000 years ago to the present day Ethiopia. A history, I should add, our education system and the media rarely cover. So as we celebrate the great victory of Adwa, it's only appropriate to reflect on the global media coverage of Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular. With that, I would like to raise two relevant questions that I think are critical. Number one, why do we care so much about how we are represented in the Western media in the first place? Is that solely dictated by the existing skewed power dynamics between Western Africa? Is it only about our rational concern that the media may influence policy choices that will have tangible impact, negative impact on the ground, on issues such as the GERD or the conflict in Tigray? Or is there a more profound emotional element of us yearning for approval from the West? Is this a symptom of the fact that we haven't matured as a modern, independent state yet, and therefore have not developed the inherent confidence that comes with it? I will leave this aspect of emotional liberation from dependence for your reflection. Number two, I can safely say that as Africans, our prevailing perception of the Western media is that it portrays Africa as a dark continent of unspeakable tribal savageries, unmitigated suffering, horrible epidemics, brutal dictatorship, and so on. So the question is the media negatively unique to African coverage? We know that in general, the news media and reporting tend to slant towards the negative and the sensational, turn on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or read any of the newspapers, we will immediately see most of the news and reporting is negative. So the critical question is the negative media coverage of Africa a normal feature of the negative media landscape, or is there something more to it? So I would argue there is one big difference with African coverage. That is, African news and reporting is largely decontextualized and inadequately researched or sourced, which can easily make it misleading or in many instances outright false. I'll present a few vivid examples from the reporting on the conflict in Tigray and conclude. On January 22nd, The Week reported Nobel Peace Prize winner suspended power, internet, and phone services throughout the region. On January 17th, our own Globe and Mail reported refugee camps are torched, hospitals are looted, starvation looming in Ethiopia. This was reported by Jeffrey York, who was based 6,000 kilometers away in South Africa. On January 23rd, The Economist headlined its report, "The Ethiopian government appears to be wielding hunger as a weapon." And CBN News reported 750 people massacred at Ethiopian church in Aksum at the hands of Eritrean sources, citing Belgium-based NGO which used Martin Plaut as its source. The same Martin Plaut who publicly admitted crying for 24 hours when one of the TPLF fugitives were captured. And the same Plaut that tweeted, "Yes, I lie sometimes to push my own agenda." In all of the above examples, there was no mention of any important backgrounds which would allow the readers to make sense of the events and get a proper perspective. No mention of the absolutely irrefutable fact that TPLF preemptively attacked a federal army base, killed and took hostage thousands, and that it seized heavy military equipment, which it claimed was about 70% of the country's military capacity. No mention of the fact that as a result of this attack, the border with Eritrea became porous, possibly leading to infiltration of Eritrean troops. No mention of the fact that TPLF leaders released 13,000 convicted criminals from jail minutes before they fled Mekelle, possibly leading to various crimes and atrocities. And finally, no mention of TPLF intentionally destroyed infrastructure as it runs to the mountains, seriously hampering communication and relief efforts. So it was just blanket statements, broad allegations of refugee camps being torched and widespread looting and so on. So it's highly unlikely that any of the above media would allow such incompetence, devoid of any context, and as a result, misleading or outright false reporting when covering any crisis in the West. Therefore, I would argue the problem is not per se the African coverage is uniquely negative. It is the fact that a different standard is applied when the media routinely resorts to familiar cognitive shortcuts to quickly categorize situations into stereotyped reductions. Therefore, I believe as Canadians of Ethiopian origin, we are uniquely positioned to fill these gaps of decontextualization and lack of comprehensive research and sourcing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Petros, for your great presentation. It was so nice to hear your talk. Thank you. Mr. Jeff Pierce, I am so honored to introduce him. Mr. Jeff Pierce is a journalist, historian, and full-time author. Mr. Pierce has traveled far and wide to get his unique stories. His most recent work of history is Prevail, the inspiring story of Ethiopians' victory over Mussolini's invasion. He tracked down survivors from the Italian-Ethiopian War of the 1930s and 40s, and he uncovered shocking record about Britain's role during the conflict in London archives. And for Winkin Bull, his new biography of archaeologist and adventurer Henry Laird, he went all the way to Iraq to interview Kurdish Defense Force less than 2 kilometers away from a town controlled by ISIS. And in 2005, he briefly taught journalism in Myanmar. His book of investigative journalism, Gangs in Canada, has been adopted as a textbook for criminology. His science fiction and fantasy works, such as Karma Booze and Rich TV, have earned critical praise from indie reviewers as well as loyal following. He has also had success in theater world. His stage play, Lady with a Smoking Gun, has chosen an open play noir in Los Angeles in 2018. In 2015, his history of Sex in Canada, Who to Make Love in Canon, was adopted into hilarious musical comedy production by the University of Toronto's Theatre Arendelle. And in 2007, his play, Defender of Gravity, was chosen by a professional panel in inaugurate the Playwright of Spring Festival in Toronto. Please let's welcome Mr. Pierce. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that great intro. Can everybody hear me? Let's do the check while I'm here, just to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We hear you, Jay.
Yes, we do.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got that at least. Okay. Thank you for that intro. Wow, let's go get that guy instead of me. I don't have, originally I was going to do a whole a video for you guys rather than you have to put up with me for half an hour. And unfortunately, I'm just not that technically proficient. So sorry, I'm what you get. But let's go back to the fact of marking the 125th anniversary of ADWA, because let's bring it home to our theme. And while we're at it, let's drive a few historical revisionists into a rabid frenzy, because now if you say Menelik, they scream in horror, because they're trying to recast him as some kind of super villain. And I couldn't find it today, but I've seen a photo of Ascari's warriors for the Italian sides lined up literally to get their limbs hacked off, right hand, left foot. They would leave these captives alive. The Italians killed their traitors. But what I find interesting is, and why I'm bringing it up, is Menelik didn't want that. He wanted moderation. He wanted the prisoners not treated and punished that way. There's a witness, I'm quoting this from Raymond Jonas's excellent The Battle of Adwa. His natural goodness inclined him towards forgiveness. And that's a quote from someone who was there. And that's interesting because we don't even get that in terms of ADWA celebrations as much. I don't think you get into that. And then you have the other aspect of the way that the image of Menelik quickly turned around by the Western media immediately after the battle. This is typical, if you can see this, and I'll switch to showing my monitor so that I can make sure that I'm actually holding it properly. You can see that he's in a well-regarded American newspaper at the time. And they turned him into a celebrity. He is, you can find even online covers of magazine covers, and he's on he's in Vanity Fair and so forth. And the whole image changes because, of course, as has been pointed out earlier by other presenters, this was a huge victory for Africa. And I see there's an image up. Can you still hear me? Are you still getting me? Someone please acknowledge.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Good.
There's a placeholder there. But the point is, now they reframe it so that Ethiopians aren't black, because God knows we can't have a white army beaten by an African army. And that's one of the first occasions where we just see the total literal whitewashing in terms of Western media. So I think it's apropos to bring this up in terms of media information and disinformation. I've got a bit of ground to cover, and I'm not keeping an eye on my time, so you guys shut me up when you want, but let's run through some quick points here. We've already heard the examples. I'm not going to go through a lot of them simply because you can go and read my articles for that. You don't need me rattling them off. We've all seen the preemptive attack video boasted by a TPLF spokesman, and which really changed my whole view of the conflict. And I just went, okay, that's it. Facts are facts. You're going to deny this. You've seen the eulogies online for Sayum Mesfin, like we're all living in a parallel world. And right now the West thinks that Ethiopia is evil over not granting access for humanitarian aid and journalists, even though none of that was ever completely true. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to read stories on France 24 and Reuters. So we can rattle off these examples, but I'd rather go into why this is happening to make it useful. And the fact of the matter is the Western media is like drama. It likes conflict. The way editors and producers are trained, conflict is the story. And some of you have heard this anecdote, and I wasn't going to trot it out, but I think it will make some impact for those who haven't heard. When I was working for a certain network in London, a story didn't go quite as well in terms of the video. And I had a producer say to me afterwards, and I don't care why the Africans are fighting. Just show the Africans fighting, which tells you volumes about the way they think. You've already seen the magazine covers, which Faseha, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, showed. Here is a just catalog of the way Africa is viewed. Now, all these books are excellent, but they add up. You've got the state of Africa. You have Darfur. You have, whoops, I'm dropping them here. You have a rope from the sky in terms of South Sudan. We're keeping going. We've got the Rwanda crisis. We have City of Thorns on the refugee thing. I'm not done yet. We've got Angola, promises and lies. Still not enough? The looting machine. We've got surrender or starve. We've got I did do it for you on Eritrea. We've got Eritrea. And we could go on and on and on. And that is just the books that I own. And that, never mind just the magazine covers and the television reports and all of that, that is how they see the continent. Now, the thing is, you know, we can go over the examples of bias. I'm sure some of you have seen the Hard Talk interview with the Attorney General of Ethiopia. And it was fascinating because I like the show sometimes, but it's called Hard Talk, but it's not supposed to be hard, empty talk. The guest was a constitutional law scholar. And instead of playing gotcha, we could have been learning stuff, and it could have been just as challenging. He could have been asked, well, do you see any need for the change of the political framework? And how would that go over? Does the Constitution have to be changed? Is that as fault as a lot of people think? How would you fix it? And so on. But we got none of that. And at one point, the Attorney General, who impressed the hell out of me as a very erudite gentleman, said, well, how would you guys react if you had an army military base attacked? And Stephen Sacker just rolled over that and just went back to the humanitarian crisis and put all on the shoulders of the government without any consideration of the fact of, well, let's see, as Lawrence Freeman pointed out in a recent article, how many million were already in need and suffering while the TPLF was still in power in terms of the region of Tigray. And plus he points out the math doesn't even work out in terms of what's being put out there. And so now we come to the US Capitol. And you cannot imagine how many tweets I saw of people going with a certain amount of schadenfreude, which I consider justified, saying, well, gee, why don't you just sit down and talk to QAnon and talk to the Proud Boys and negotiate? And I had to laugh along with them. It was horrible what was happening, but you had to say, gee, And nobody really did a hard think and said, and rethought their principles. But part of the problem is consider who they're getting to interpret events. How many times do you see Tronville, Johnny on the spot, to comment on things? You've got Al Jazeera, New York Times, Financial Times, Reuters, Bloomberg, Politico, not a whisper of the fact that this guy didn't give a damn about ethics or the country's law in terms of going in to be an observer of the Tigray election, not a whisper about the fact that he's been investigated in terms of finances for his past company by his own government. That never gets in. He just recently got onto an article moaning about how he's the target of death threats, which in actual fact I do not doubt. But he is the main source. One of the world's leading experts on Ethiopia, Professor Tronville, and as I pointed out, I think last night, no, the leading experts on Ethiopia are Ethiopians. So, and what is it with the language here of the leading experts on Ethiopia? You never hear from the leading experts on France. There is no leading expert on Canada. What is it with the language there? But this is the guy you get. And when you get him over and over again in the major media operations, that is one view. That is the same view over and over again. Why is it that no one is talking to Naman Zelike? Why is it that no one is talking to the ambassador, Ethiopia's ambassador to Canada? Why is it that we don't see the ambassador's response to lurid articles and editorials in the Globe and Mail? And they don't even take a response to that. So just moving on, because we do have some ground to cover, what does this have to, how we get to the why of this? And part of it is I would like to find out how many journalism faculties are there? Because I don't know. I would like to know. How many journalism faculties are there where there is a required course for knowing world history? Because if you are going to go off to be a correspondent, how do you do your job just landing like an astronaut into space, into a country, and you don't know the past? If you were going to go cover the Myanmar protest tomorrow, do you know about the Saffron Revolution? Do you know about 1988 when more protesters were killed than in Tiananmen Square the following year? I have seen comments on Twitter by people who think that the Derg was just the Amhara in control or the Oromo in control. And I have to literally shout through, it was a Marxist regime, and educate these people. So who are they talking to? How much do they know? And then we come to the problem of who are they going to get to talk to? And let's bring it full circle to me, because I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be talking to you at all. I'm nobody. There should be another Ethiopian filling this slot. And I've asked several times when I get these invitations, don't you have an Ethiopian who can talk in my place? There's surely someone better qualified than me. And I'm invited to these things and I appreciate them and I'm happy to participate. But the thing is, every time I'm on camera or somebody wants to talk to me, that is a slot that could go to somebody from the country. Now, I realize the reasoning because they know that, as somebody put it to me last night, making another invite, white people are only listening to white people. But as long as I do that, that keeps the perpetual wheel going. So we have to make me obsolete. And I think there has to be steps in that regard. We have to, this is going to sound like an inflammatory statement, but I don't give a damn because it's about time we started getting some press for this. It's time to deplatform Human Rights Group, Human Rights Watch. It's time to deplatform Amnesty International. It's time to deplatform Crisis Group. Why is anyone listening to William Davidson at all when he has a huge conflict of interest? He is supposed to be there doing God knows what in terms of helping two sides get together, but he runs a side business of a little online rag, which seems to have the main purpose of keeping the pot stirring. One of his most recent articles published online was one of Tronvol's propaganda pieces all over again. Why is anyone talking to this man? In the same way that Black Lives Matter put the focus as well in terms of representation, we have to kick these people out and say, no. You talk to Africans first. You don't need the filter of Kenneth Roth. You don't need the filter of these people. The thing is, are we set to go? Can we keep going?
Yeah. Keep on.
So the thing is, to deplatform these organizations does not mean deplatforming a free press. I would rather see an army of half-competent reporters allowed into the country to investigate, to talk to witnesses. Because why are they going to the filter? I can find you online a Deutsche Welle story where they spoke to, it's in an article that I wrote. They talked to William Davidson, they talked to Tronvol, they talked to Michaela Wrong. Not one Ethiopian, not one Eritrean. How would you like to do a story on Poland and never talk to any Poles? Or Germany without talking to any Germans? Or Belgium without talking to any Belgians? How do you have the hubris to do that to another country? And they do it, they have their other tricks where the goal is, well, this is being objective. So in other words, in the same way that we used to, please forgive the comparison, in the same way that the Me Too movement had to come along and say, excuse me, why don't you listen to the victims of sexual assault? In the same way that the Black movement had to come along and say, excuse me, how about you talk to us first? I can remember, and I don't want to embarrass the network, but they invited me on to talk about the Rohingya crisis. And I said, well, who do you got from the Rohingya to represent? And they weren't going to have anybody. I spent part of a day hunting down a Rohingya activist for them to talk to, because otherwise it would have been three white guys talking about a country that none of us lived in, that we were thousands of miles away. So we've got to force the issue and say, no, why are you sending this dude here if he doesn't know about the country? Okay, never mind color. What about, does he know the history? Does he know anything about us? Blah, blah, blah. Then you get on to saying, well, let's have better African representation in terms of journalism. Then you say, get rid of the filters of these organizations because they can investigate human rights abuses. And plus you get these people to also hopefully cover industry, cover the economy, cover cultural progress, because the crisis merchants are there paid for by other governments or the World Bank to do crisis. They're not there for you. I had an epiphany last night because I'm lying in bed and I'm trying to think of useful advice for this forum. And it hit me that was the real tragedy of what is going on is you have a very sophisticated propaganda machine in terms of the TPLF, which is doing its damnedest to undermine Ethiopia as a state. And as I've been on record, I do not have a position one way or the other with the Abiy government or more internal politics or anything like that. It's not my place. It's not my role. And God knows there's media lined up around the block. But they're doing their damnedest to try to destroy the state with alternative histories and so forth. And the thing that occurred to me is, you poor bastards, pardon my language, you don't get it. You think you have a pet obedient dog in the media. No, the dog is rabid. And if you got what you wanted, if somehow the TPLF were successful tomorrow and you had some kind of secessionist state, they would be poised and ready to leap on your failure as well, because they're hoping for you to fail, because that is the story. They're not there to cheer you on when you have a success. One of those books that I showed was about South Sudan in terms of the tragedy of that state breaking off on its own. You don't think they're going to do the same to you? So now we come back to what is useful. And the thing that is useful is if I include myself generously as an ally, we have to get back to, okay, how do we do this smarter and better? We don't go after people in terms of personal attacks. There was a gentleman I do respect today. He's even thanked in Prevail. And he just did a column today on how, my gosh, there's a great sinister network to attack critics. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting, seeing as though I know at least 2 people have had death threats against them. We don't do that. You take the high road. You deal in facts. You push for greater representation of Ethiopian voices in the media. You deplatform these people acting as filters in the way. And then you take a lesson from their book in terms of sophisticated public relations, in terms of saying, okay, in the long term, keep the lines of communication open to promote good news, promote GERD and how GERD is going to benefit not just the country, but in terms of the whole region. Talk about things which are helping in terms of development and so forth. There's more that we could go on in this, but I have no idea whether I've run over my time or not. So you tell me, guys.
That's okay. You have got a couple more minutes and then we'll go to the Q&A session.
I've got a couple of more minutes. Let's see if I've missed anything. There is just to touch base. The thing is, we're also dealing with a tremendous amount of, one of the points which I forgot, is we're also dealing with an incredible amount of arrogance, just incredible hubris of just the idea that you have the right. Yes, I believe in free press. I believe in access to media. That does not necessarily mean you are the person who should be coming in to barge into a country and be the inspector. And that same goes for Crisis Group. It same goes for Human Rights Watch. Who made you the arbiters of world morality? Screw you. You know, you don't think that there are human rights organizations within the state itself that can do this. And if you're going to question their legitimacy or their ability to do this, I'd like to know what's behind that, because underneath that is not only an agenda, but at least from Western media organizations, a deep-seated racism, I believe. Because when you say, well, we want to go and get the objective from the white crisis group or human rights person, that means that you are taking away the agency and the voice of an Ethiopian person who can be the witness and representative. And it drives me insane. So I would love to be one of these dignified people in Zoom calls, but the more I think about this stuff, the more I realized, yeah, we got to get angry and we got to say, how dare you, and push it and say, no, the sovereignty of the state is they can conduct their own affairs and they don't answer to you. They don't answer to you as Western media. We don't answer to you as a human rights organization. They answer to the Ethiopian people. I'm sure I must have used up my time now. So let's stop there.
I want to invite Her Excellency Nasisi Chali Jira, an ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of Ethiopia to Canada, to give her remark, and then after that we will go to question and answer. Please welcome me, Her Excellency Ambassador Nasisi.
Thank you, Dr. Mulu. I think thank you to all presenters for the excellent presentations and the timely issues you have covered. It is really wonderful. I didn't prepare any remarks. I just joined you to listen in and learn, and I think taking the wonderful points that are raised by all presenters. But since this is Adwa, and Adwa is it holds a very special place in every Ethiopian's, and I can say in every Black people's heart. I just want to say a few things. So in this 125th anniversary, if you ask me what Adwa is for me, I think it is a heroic symbol of independence. It is a symbol of redemption and freedom for Ethiopians and the Black people. And the symbolism is more significant today than ever, especially in the face of the many challenges our country is facing. So even if the victory was marked 125 years ago, its glory lives on in everyone's heart. And there are, I think, important lessons every generation of Ethiopians and every generation of Black people can learn from it. And I believe that there are, I think, two important lessons to be drawn from the victory of Adwa. The first lesson, I believe, is the need to stand up and fight injustice in all its forms, whether it is in the form of foreign aggression or in whatever form it can come, and the need to fight for freedom and sovereignty, and the need to rise up to meet up the challenge of the day. So Adwa was, as I said, was the result of Italian invasion, as we all know. Also, colonialism in its obvious form is well behind us. We still see subtle and not so subtle meddling and interference from time to time, and unjust impositions that we witness, attempts to pressure Ethiopia into submission. And we can, go on. So those challenges are still there, including challenges like poverty. So we have to draw the lesson from what that generation did to really rise up and meet the challenge of the day. So we have to, I think, do the same thing, fight poverty and fight injustice in all its forms. And I think the second lesson we can draw from Adwa is the importance of unity. So our ancestors, our forefathers, came together from every corner of Ethiopia to overcome the challenge they faced, to force out the aggressors, to force out those colonialists. And Ethiopians today have to also come together and unite to face the challenge of the day. So we are Ethiopians, and Ethiopians always come together in the face of adversity. They did then, they are now, and they will always continue to do so. So I think these are the two important lessons we have to always remember when we mark, the anniversary of Adwa, and we have to, I think, take this lesson with us always. So it's not just a day we reminiscence in the past, but it is a day we remind ourselves of the importance of unity, and the victory of Adwa will be transcended to the next generation to stand for our common vision. So I just wanted to just mention these few two important lessons so that we can remember them and take it with us, especially today than any other time. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. I am honored to be joining you this evening to listen in and learn from you all. Thank you very much. And maybe one more thing, I want to also say thank you to all of you, people like Jeff and others as well, who always stand with the truth and who always side with the truth. I just wanted to thank all of you who are in the side of the truth.
Thank you, Mrs. Ambassador.